Welcome everyone to the Wednesday morning video webinar series. This today is a special edition. We have our normal hosts, but we had an opportunity, and I heard about Debra Doak from a betrayed partner who had engaged with her services, and I was like, I need to know more about that. So Debra and I had a conversation, and she was willing to come join us on this platform and provide some information about about this journey, and she will share. But she had a little quote, and I wrote it down, and I should have grabbed it. But like, if you're going to stay, do it well. So she'll tell you about that. But I loved that. I was like, whatever you choose, make sure it's intentional and you're doing it appropriately. So she'll talk about that. But I'm going to turn it over to Debra. The questions that our participants here will be typed in the Q&A and will be answered in a general way. And if you're viewing this afterwards, Debra is going to send me the slides, and you can email Tammy, Tami, at seekingintegrity.com too, and she'll put information about how to reach out to her as well. So without further ado, Debra, I'm going to turn it over to you. You can tell the group a little bit about how you got into this work and why you're passionate about helping others.
Yes, I will do that. I'll tell you what, I do have some slides because it helps me keep on track and not stray too far off topic. So let me start with that. And I'm going to get into what brought me here in just a little bit. So let's start off with some surprising things you should know about divorce if you're thinking about it. So I just want to hit these hard in the beginning. First and most important, you have more control over the cost and the outcome than you realize. I did a survey of my mailing list, and I was so surprised that only 20% of the respondents told me they thought they had a significant influence on how much their divorce cost or what the outcome was. And I want you to know that that's not true. You actually have so much power. I want you to know that planning, preparation, and the right support make a huge difference in your experience. The next thing I want you to know is that an amicable divorce is possible, even if you hate your spouse, even if they're acting the fool, even if there's lots of conflict and disagreement, because an amicable divorce is facilitated by the professionals you surround yourself with, not by your partner. Okay? And the last thing I really want you to know is that negotiation and conflict resolution skills can be learned. Okay, so that's kind of where I want to start. And I am going to go really fast through these slides so that we have I have a lot of information, but I want to take time for questions too.
Perfect.
Okay. Why do women stay stuck when they think they might want to leave? Fear, right? And I get that. The idea of divorce, especially if you're on the internet these days, on social media, you see these horror stories. So it can feel intimidating. It can feel scary. I get it. It's unknown. There's so much uncertainty, right? But I also want you to pay attention to that fear. It's there for a reason, right? It's there as your body and your nervous system's warning signal. And sometimes these fears that are coming up for you, and we're going to talk about a few particular ones, those are shaped over years of experience interacting with your spouse. Like, you have the best intelligence. So it's not coming out of nowhere. I want you to pay attention to it. I don't want it to let it drive your decisions, but pay attention to it. Okay? So what are some of the common fears that keep people stuck? I'm not going to be able to support myself. I won't have financial support. I'll lose time with my kids, the house. I don't understand money. It's going to cost too much. I'm going to lose my in-laws. I'm going to take a lifestyle hit. I'm afraid my partner's hiding money. It's going to be too conflicted. I'm not going to be able to stand up for myself. My spouse is going to be really angry if I make this decision and make it difficult. Those are the most common fears that I hear. But what I want you to know is there's an antidote to fear, and it's information and it's planning. Okay. Now, I'm here today speaking as a divorce coach, and one thing I want you to know about divorce coaching is that it's actually defined by the American Bar Association as a form of dispute resolution. It's not life coaching. We are here to help you manage the conflict and get resolution that you need for your property settlement and your parenting plan if you've got kids. Okay, so that's really at the focus of a divorce coach, is to help you get this resolved. All right. So when I start working with a client, the first thing I like to start with is those fears, because fears are questions waiting to be answered, nothing more, or a plan that you need to develop. So I'm always going to encourage you to think about that fear and get to the question behind it. Where can you find that information? Who can you talk to learn more? We want you to feel empowered if this is the direction you're going to go. And I think Tammy referred to what I say is, what I'd like you always to be doing is making a decision that you're able to stay well. You're going to wait with intention. So I'm not leaving yet, but I know why I'm staying, or you're going to go with a plan. Okay. Quick disclaimer, I am not an attorney. I understand you're going to have an attorney visit, so nothing I'm going to talk about today in the divorce process should be considered legal advice. I just want to say that. Okay. This is a quick journaling exercise that I sometimes have clients do if they're still not sure, because our brain tends to focus on the negative. And so almost always everybody goes to that lower right quadrant. What do I lose if I leave? And that's where we get stuck. But I'd like you to think about, but what do I gain if I leave? And what do I lose if I stay? Okay. Ultimately, whether you decide to stay or go, if you're even thinking about this right now, I want to talk to you about preparing for the night you take dinner out of the oven. I was in your position. We were trying to work to rebuild trust. And I was really, really on the fence about the whole thing. I thought divorce was a possibility, but I hadn't really done any planning or preparing. And then one night, a small thing was just it for me. It was a short interaction where he was giving me silent treatment again over. He didn't like my tone when I called him out on a lie. And it was just that instant. I was in the middle of cooking dinner. I turned off the oven. I took the food out. I packed a bag and I left. And I see this happen frequently where you're kind of on the fence. You're not sure. And it's never a big thing. It's a small thing. So what I hope you're going to gather from today and your work with whoever you're going to work with is this: planning for divorce doesn't mean you're going to divorce. What it means is I'm gathering information, I'm reducing the uncertainty so that if that night comes that I take dinner out of the oven, you won't make all the mistakes I did. Okay, that's really the point. Okay, so keys to a successful divorce. These come from conflict coaching. We want you to have clarity about what the problem or the fear or the obstacle is. Comprehension, what do I need to understand? Choices, what options are available? We want you to feel confident and competent that you can enter into this process. Okay. First things first. Please don't take action. Don't make any comments. Don't make threats until you're sure your decision is final. Work with somebody to identify your goals for the divorce process and your life after divorce, because we want you to be making goal-oriented, values-based decisions as you enter into and go through this process. I want you to think about a divorce budget. How much do you have available or do you want to spend on divorce? Because the decisions you make will impact your cost. Go ahead and start gathering your support team. Maybe you need an attorney, maybe you don't. I'm going to suggest your first call is to a divorce coach. Let them help you figure out what process, and we're going to talk about that. But you can go ahead and consult attorneys, coaches, mediators, certified divorce financial analysts, right? Who are you going to need on your team? Be purposeful about what information you share and with whom. And prepare yourself for a process that is going to take longer and is going to be more complicated than you would like or you would expect. And that's why having this support is really important. Okay. I thought this was a funny graph. This is how simple the divorce process is, right? It's just very straightforward. It's not. It's complex. It's nuanced. We say family law is an art, not a science. You will rarely ever get a direct answer to, can I get this? Can I have this? Will this exact thing happen? The answer is always, depends, right? It's very complex. So I want to talk with you about how much divorce costs, because we talked about a divorce budget. So I just want to talk to you about a few ways. There's lots of DIY services. There's Hello Divorce and divorce.com. Those can be relatively inexpensive. You can go directly to your local county courthouse and get the forms and file them. Okay. So that's DIY and online. There's mediation. We're going to spend a little time talking about mediation. There's something called collaborative law. There's attorney to attorney negotiation and litigation. I want you to know the average divorce with attorneys costs each party $15,000 to $20,000. And if you add in lots of conflict and lots of motions and lots of filings and guardian ad litem and stuff, you're easily going to be over 6 figures each. So just for your decision making, and I'm not saying that to scare you. Okay. So I talked about a divorce budget, and this is considering how much you have available for your divorce, because you cannot have a Lamborghini divorce on a Kia budget. So we've got to decide up front what that's going to look like. Okay. Let's talk about what you have to make decisions about in divorce. When you think about divorce, I want you to equate that with decision making, right? Divorce is all about decisions. It's negotiating that property settlement agreement, negotiating a parenting plan, making decisions about how you're going to behave, how you're going to show up, how you're going to communicate. Okay? We use this acronym PEACE to kind of remember the big issues in divorce. So the first P is for parenting. How are the children going to spend time with each parent? How are you going to share expenses? How are you going to do decision making? Okay. E is for equitable distribution. This is all the marital property, and it's everything you own, everything you owe, and your stuff. Okay. So it's the house, the retirement account, student loans, your cars, the sofa, and the TV. A is for alimony or spousal support or spousal maintenance. Depending on the state you're in, it may be called something different, but this is monthly or lump sum support paid to the lower earning spouse to help them be able to provide for their needs. C is child support. Now, I want you to notice, and if we have questions about it, I'm happy to talk about parenting. Parenting time and child support should be separate topics and not related, and we shouldn't be making decisions about parenting time based on someone's budget. So that's why we separate them out. But child support is a calculation in every state. It's paid to the lower earning spouse or the spouse with more parenting time. And then E is everything else. And believe it or not, this is a big category. It's everything from, pets to who's keeping the Amazon account to we need to redo our wills, all kinds of things like that. So divorce itself is a legal process. We know that, which is why so many people default to let me go hire an attorney. And that is the legal process you have to go through to get divorced. But then there's how you negotiate your agreement. And that does not necessarily require an attorney. So I'm just throwing these out as options that are available in some places for kind of how you negotiate your agreement. And I want you to notice from left to right. On the left side, we have the lowest cost and the most control over our own outcome. And on the far right with litigation, it's the most cost and we have the least amount of control because a judge or someone else is going to decide the outcome for us. So there's all the DIY stuff that I talked about. There's something called pro se mediation, which is where you and your spouse meet with a neutral third party, a mediator. There's mediation with attorneys and on and on and on, and then more and more involvement from the court. And if you have questions about these things, I'm happy to talk about them. I just wanted to throw them out there for you. Okay. So how does divorce work in your state? You should understand this. One thing I think people fail to realize a lot is you actually, whether or not you wrote a separate one, you have a prenuptial agreement. It's your state law.
Mm.
State law has already determined how will we divide this up if our marriage doesn't work out. So it's important to understand how it works in your state. Are there residency requirements? Do you have mandatory separation or waiting periods? So for instance, in, I think it's Virginia, you have to be separated for a year before you can file for divorce. In California, there's not that separation requirement, but there's a 6-month waiting period. So once you file even your signed agreement, you have to wait 6 months before they'll finalize it. You can look up child support calculations. You can figure out if you have concerns about property you owned before marriage or an inheritance or something that you don't want to be part of the marital pie to be divided. You can learn about how that's defined for your state. You can understand what factors are considered for spousal support or alimony. You can understand what's required in your state. Do I have to file? Does the other person have to be served or not? It's not always. And you can take a look at the required forms because divorce requires a lot of paperwork. Okay. So start educating yourself because again, information is the antidote to fear. Okay. So you can go to your local county court. They'll have a domestic relations court, or they'll call it something like that, civil court. They likely have an outline of the process and all the forms. Your state bar association will have that. Or you can go to any of these 3 websites. I love womenslaw.org. They also have a lot of domestic violence resources if that's a concern for you. Okay. I just want to talk a little bit about mediation because it is becoming the preferred method for people to negotiate their agreements. And almost all states now are requiring mediation. You know, we're in touch with kind of the professionals in the divorce landscape. And I was at an American Bar Association continuing education that was given by judges. And the judges were saying, we don't want to make these decisions for you. We are going to send you back to mediation. That's not, we shouldn't be making decisions about your parenting or how you're splitting the 401k. We trust your ability to get this decided. So what do you need to know about mediation? Well, it's voluntary and self-directed. It's significantly lower cost because you're sharing that cost. It's typically less adversarial, maybe not at the beginning. So if conflict is something you fear or a power dynamic imbalance, you might be thinking, well, mediation's not for me. And I want you to know that a good mediator will manage that room, will manage the interactions, okay? The mediator is neutral, okay? It's not their job to ensure a fair outcome. It's their job to ensure a fair process. So that's something people, I think, get confused about sometimes. So it's still your responsibility. Remember, we talked about self-advocacy. It's still your responsibility to understand your roles, rights, responsibilities, and entitlements. It's not the mediator's job. Mediators have different approaches. Financial disclosure is still required, but the beauty of mediation is it's less about the law and it allows more creative solutions for families. Okay? The other thing we know from study after study is folks are more likely to comply with an agreement that they participated in making. Okay? And you can do mediation with or without attorneys. Okay? So if you're thinking divorce might be a path that I'm headed down, I want you to use your GPS system. And that stands for gather, prioritize, and strategize. So gathering some financial information, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Again, get some knowledge about the divorce process. You're smart. You have a job, you've run a household, you've lived your life, you pay bills on time. The divorce process is not something you cannot learn and understand. It's not some secret thing, right? So gather that information. Start to prioritize. So what are your goals? What are your desired outcomes? And see if you can start to sort out needs from wants. And we'll talk a little bit about interest versus position here in a second. And then start strategizing. Learn conflict de-escalation tools. Learn how to communicate in a way that doesn't throw fuel on the fire, right? Work with somebody that will help you do proposals and counter proposals and negotiate so that you feel like you're in charge of your own process. So we're gathering financial information. It's important that you know your numbers. This is a big part of the divorce process. And for many clients, it's a big part of decision making. So think about what your post-divorce budget would look like. Where are you going to live? So what are your housing and utility costs? What do you spend on food at the grocery and eating out and household supplies? Are you going to have to get medical insurance if you get divorced? If you're covered under your spouse's policy at their work, that's some research you'll need to do, is where are you going to get health insurance? What are your medical and dental costs? Cars, pets, clothing, entertainment, any debt. Don't forget gifts. People always underestimate how much they spend on gifts. So start getting a handle on what your monthly budget might look like after divorce, right? And start getting a picture of your marital estate. What is on the table to be divided? Do you have a home? Do you have a rental property? Do you have a vacation home? Cars, boats, RVs, motorcycles, and then of course all your bank accounts, investment accounts. Do one or both of you own a business? Is that business a marital asset? It might be. Retirement, pension, debts, things like that. So start to get a picture, start gathering all this information. It's really important to know your numbers, especially this monthly cash flow number, and that's typically where I'll start working with clients because of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If this is new to you, again, you can look at the slides, but the base of this pyramid is physiological needs, okay? Air, food, shelter. What we know about Maslow's hierarchy of needs is until your level 1 needs are satisfied, you're not able to move up and start working on your level 2 needs, much less getting all the way to level 5, which is self-actualization or your best self. If you have fear that your physiological needs are not going to be met, you're not going to be showing up as your best self. You're not going to be concerned about the relationship with your spouse. So that's why that monthly cash flow is so important. Right? Okay. Then when it comes to your agreement, there are so many options, and I want you to really think about this. I call it playing Legos, okay? Because we don't just take a buzzsaw and cut everything in half. It's a lot more nuanced than that. And so I say you can build the same size and shape of Lego tower with an almost infinite combination of bricks. I don't have to use the white one that has 8 spots on it. I could replace that with 2 blue ones that have 4, or 4 red ones that have 2. So being creative about how we're going to get to agreement becomes really important. And it should be a Venn diagram that is taking into account your interests, what's best for you, your spouse's interests, because they need to agree, and your children's best interests. And the sweet spot is in the middle somewhere. This is the orange story, which we teach in all of our trainings. I also train divorce coaches. So a brother and sister are fighting over an orange. They both want it. They're yelling, right? Mom's finally had it. So she walks in the room, she cuts the orange in half and gives each of them a half and says, there, I settled it. But neither one of the kids was happy because the boy wanted the orange juice for something he was cooking, and the girl needed all of the orange peel for a project she was working on. So position is what people say they want. I want the orange. Interest is really what they want or what motivates them. And that's what we really want to try to get to when we're approaching divorce negotiations. If mom had simply asked, what about that orange is important to you? We would have had a mutually satisfying solution. But we skip that step. And so now nobody's happy. And we see the same thing happen in divorce settlement negotiations all the time. It's just, I want this. I want $5,000 a month in spousal support. Okay. What do you really want? Okay. What I really want likely is comfort that I don't have to worry about paying my bills every month. Okay. The difference between those two statements is I want $5,000 a month in alimony. That is a win-lose, black or white, yes or no proposition. Either I get it or I don't. But if I can do it in an interest-based manner, what I'm really, my goal is really to not worry about paying my bills every month. There might be more ways to reach that goal than just $5,000 a month in spousal support. It could be diverting some funds to pay off a student loan or pay off a car or buy down a mortgage, or there are many multiple ways. So that's what we're trying to generate options so that we don't just lock horns and call it a day. How am I doing on time? Good. Okay. When it comes to kids, I want you to know that it's not divorce that harms children, it's parental conflict that does. And study after study supports this. Okay. So when it comes to parenting, you'll hear the terms custody, you'll hear visitation, you'll hear parenting time, you'll hear legal custody, you'll hear decision making. They're all different terms. So what I want you to think about is it's really two buckets. Legal custody is decision-making authority. And it's very rare, unless someone agrees, that we see sole decision-making. What we typically see is joint legal custody, joint decision-making. Okay. And then there's the residential custody or parenting time. And this is how kids are going to spend their time with each parent. But that parenting plan in general, I am a fan of very detailed parenting plans, because I think if you discuss and agree on the details now, you prevent future conflict. So we want to think about all these kinds of things. All right, this will be in the slides. I'm not going to read them to you, but I'm including the Children's Bill of Rights because this is where I see most things blow up, is parents fighting and forgetting that they have these little ones that are getting caught in the crossfire. Put them there so you can look at them. Okay. Now, if you've got somebody who has a tendency to be controlling, or you have a power imbalance dynamic, or you have concerns that they're going to get really angry or vengeful, I want you to know that post-separation abuse is a real thing, and it's important to do safety planning and financial planning for that. And I define post-separation abuse as or the post-separation period starts as soon as you tell your spouse you'd like a divorce. It doesn't necessarily mean you're living separate. It's as soon as you've made that announcement, things can go south. So I want you to realistically assess, is this something that could happen to me? And do I need to be thinking about safety planning and financial planning? Okay. So safe people, start identifying safe people. Start setting some money aside. If you're not working and don't have your own source of income and funds, Start gathering that now so that if things go south, you at least can buy groceries and put gas in your car until the court could get involved. Okay. Safe communication. Do you need a new email address? Do you need to separate out your Apple ID? Do you need to get a different phone in case you're being monitored? So I just want you to think about that. And then safe storage. You're gathering financial information. Where are you going to store those records that they're safe? You keep them at a friend's house or in the cloud in a separate account, right? Speaking of storage, make sure you're backing up your phone. If you are gathering evidence and documentation on your phone and the phone plan is under your spouse's name, let's make sure that you're backing up your phone to a cloud or to your friend's computer. And then, if you have grandma's diamond ring and it's really special to you, get those things out of the house. Move your passport, move your birth certificate. Okay. So I'm going to end with this, and that is, I say, stay in the T zone. I want you to take your time. This is not a process that should be rushed. When you rush, your emotions will take over and you won't make the best decision. I want you to address your fears, really inventory them so that we can tackle them and get you the information and support you need. Trust your gut about how you think this is going to go, where you think the points of conflict might be. Talk to professionals, think strategically, and treat yourself kindly. Okay. This slide will be there. Here's how you can get in touch with me. Okay. It's just debradoak.com. It's Debra@debradoak.com. And you can reach out if I'm not able to answer your question today. Okay. So I
Great
hit all the high
information.
points.
Yeah, well, and I've got a couple questions, and then somebody has put a question in that. So if you have questions, type them in the Q&A. When you said, like, and fear, and I thought, those fears, I mean, some of those are, it's not just fearful, like those are legitimate concerns, and
Exactly.
so it's like having this reality check of, yes, this person actually, this could be a reality. So it isn't just because sometimes fear is, it is, I'm making something out of something that is highly unlikely to happen. But with a lot of those things, they can be legitimate concerns. And so I thought, when you had the grid of, what do I gain if I stay? What do I lose if I stay? I think it's really, I think that would be really helpful to look at, and sometimes they're intangible. It's not just the money stuff and the stuff. It's like, I'm losing my mind. I'm losing, this is crazy making, I'm
Right.
losing.
What do I lose if I stay? Right. A
Yeah.
sense of peace, a sense of quiet, a sense of autonomy. There are all kinds of things, right?
One of the things, the financials, unfortunately, I've heard way too often again lately, where there are spouses that they have no idea and no input on financial. So when you're talking about gathering financial data, how would one even start that when they are specifically kept out of the loop?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one thing I want people to understand is financial disclosure is mandatory. Okay. So if I am the spouse, the out of the loop spouse, my partner, my husband does all the finances. Maybe I just have a credit card that I put my expenses on. I don't even know how much he makes. I don't know how much is in our 401k. I don't know what our mortgage balance is. That's okay. I want to reassure people that whether they go to mediation or whether they work with attorneys, there is a process in place. And this is why I want you to educate yourself about, like, the required forms. Every state has some required form of financial disclosure. It's usually called an affidavit. Sometimes it's called a statement of net worth. But each spouse has to declare to the other, basically under oath, income, expenses, assets, and debts. So everybody has the information they need before you start negotiating.
So we're talking within the arena of addiction. Addicts are
Mhm.
liars, so
Yep.
what are the consequences if an addict under oath is misrepresenting something?
Well, every judge is going to handle that differently. So
Okay,
that's
fair.
an it depends, right?
Okay.
But here's what I want you to remember. You have been married and in an intimate relationship with this person. You know the truth. You may not know the facts or the details or the specifics, but you know the truth. So I want you to trust your gut. If
Mm.
you get that financial disclosure in and you're like, hmm, that doesn't feel right. He says he earns $40,000 a year, but we live in a $500,000 house and all three of our kids go to private schools and I drive a Mercedes. No. Okay. So then that's when we want to add professionals to the mix here, and we might need to dig a little bit deeper. And that's the second phase that comes after disclosure, and that's called discovery. And in the discovery phase, and I'm sure the attorney will talk about this is where we can do things called, we can ask for documents. So you can get copies of those bank statements. If you haven't had access to the bank account, that's great. You can ask him voluntarily to provide them, but if he won't, there's a legal process in place that says, I'd like to see the last 3 years of those bank statements. I'd like to see the last 2 years of your paychecks, right?
So you talked about every state is a prenup. So if we have a prenup, does the state override, like which prenup would be, um, you know, prioritized?
So the state laws are the default. And if
Okay.
you and your spouse wrote a prenup, that's going to take precedence.
Okay.
Or a postnup in some, I know
Yes.
that's the thing with betrayed partners. Sometimes in order to rebuild trust, they'll negotiate a postnuptial agreement.
And then we've got questions. One of them is, will this presentation be posted? Yes, that this will be posted later today. But when you were sharing, like I had this moment with when people were when you were talking about the financial,
Mhm.
which divorce can you afford, kind of thing. Now,
Right.
so what happens if I'm going like I want to do DIY and mediation, and
Mhm.
but there's so much conflict, but I'm going like I don't, I mean, how do you navigate even that, that space? Is it start, where you think you can, and up level if you need to?
That's exactly it. And so
Okay.
of all those processes that are there, I almost want you to think of it as a ladder. And you have the option to start at the lowest cost, lowest conflict. And then you may need to set a boundary, and your boundary may be, okay, since you are not engaging or participating or providing the information that's necessary, the action I'm going to take, right? Because boundaries are not an ask, they're an action, is I'm going to hire an attorney now. So you can always move up that ladder in terms of cost and conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
you can, yeah. And again, you know your partner best. So you know whether the best way, and again, this is why I think that working with a divorce coach first can be so helpful to dig into this decision making in terms of, are you in the situation where it's best to sit down and have a conversation and tell your spouse and then give them some time and then start engaging in using an online or mediation service? Or are you in the kind of situation where you kind of need to do this on the down low and have them served so that a financial restraining order and some other protections are in place?
That's really helpful too, because and I know, and there's just some questions in here too about some of this, but so let's start with the next question. What
Okay.
about a separation prior to divorce? How do we go about that? And so we talk about a formal therapeutic disclosure, or I mean
Yep.
separation. So
Separation.
that would be one way, but what about a legal, or
So that depends on your state laws.
okay.
So some states recognize legal separation, some don't.
Mm,
So again, that's why I would want you to be working with someone who can help you identify your goal. Because I have a lot of people that really kind of sit on that fence between, do I just want to get separated or do I want to get divorced? And I think you really need to process that decision about why are we pursuing a separation and not a divorce? Now, maybe it's a legal requirement, but yeah. So again, state laws are going to get involved. There are some places that don't recognize, right? Like Virginia is one that comes up all the time with clients because they require a year of separation in order to file for divorce, but they don't recognize legal separation.
Oh, wow.
So it's a real conundrum for the spouse that wants to leave but is financially dependent because there's no legal protection for financial support during that year of separation. It becomes really difficult.
And so what I think I hear you saying is they require a physical separation.
It
And
can be an in-house,
oh, okay.
but again, you need to understand what does and doesn't qualify for an in-home separation.
Yes. And those
And
are challenging, even from a therapeutic
yes,
in-home separation. It is like, well, I'm going to get the kitchen from this time to this time, and you're going to have your cupboard. Like, yeah, I think
yeah,
with everything you've been talking about, the more clear your plan is,
yes.
on all of these things, it isn't like, well, we'll just figure it. No, we need to have a plan on that.
You need to have a plan, you need to have information. And, I always say it's a success if you're making informed, intentional decisions. But it all starts with what is your goal. So if someone's asking about separation, my first processing with them as a coach would be talk to me about what your goals are with this separation.
So the next question is there any data on how essays take being notified of divorce better or worse than normal? Um, and I know this is the arena you focus on. So do you have any thoughts on that?
So I will say, no, I don't have any data. I'll just say that straight up. I don't have any data. I can tell you from experience that, again, you have a lot of control about how much conflict escalates, about how you show up, how you communicate, how you approach things, right? So I think it's, again, being intentional about that process and making sure you're not throwing fuel on the fire of somebody and again, it's you've got essays out there that are pretty meek and mild people, and you've got essays out there that are full-blown personality disorders. So just like the rest of the population, I think, again, it depends on who you're married to, and you know that best.
And we've been talking about this. It feels like from a betrayed partner initiating, a divorce, but I often hear too that the addict has chosen for a variety of reasons, like I'm not going to do any recovery work or whatever.
Exactly.
And so all of these tools still apply, even if you're not choosing in that moment, to divorce, that you've
Yes.
been served. So.
Yes, if you've been served, because one of the things that's so important to remember is that divorce is hard. It's difficult. It's a change in your life plan that you didn't expect. It's also temporary. And so we always want to have our eyes focused on the future and be making decisions and taking actions and doing things that are going to set you up for a future that you want to live in.
That's a great point. Okay, so the next one is these things are great information about the divorce process. However, what do you recommend to someone looking for non-legal separation and then maybe legal separation prior to divorce? That feels like part of what is the goal of the separation too.
Exactly. Exactly. Because I will simply say that for most of my people, for the betrayed partners I've worked with, yes, certainly. If you've got somebody who's participating in recovery activities and is willing to do a healing therapeutic separation, that's great. But most of my people, once they talk about a legal separation and we get into it, it's just fear that's making them think. And when we really dive into it, what they realize is they're just kicking the can down the road.
That's what it feels like. It's like I don't want to have to make that big, that feels like such a big decision to cut all the ties, and I still care about this person, but it's, chaos. So but it
Yeah,
feels like kicking
yeah.
the can down the road. So
It usually ends up, once we explore that in a couple sessions, that's really what's going on, unless there's a real legit reason.
So if I'm the breadwinner, how do you see the addiction leverage to account for his lack of responsibility and finances? That's another great question.
Would you tell me that again?
So now this is the betrayed partner that is the
And she's the
breadwinner,
breadwinner.
and the addict has had lack of financial responsibility. And
Mhm.
what would be the consequences of that when in looking at this, as you're moving forward?
Yeah, so I'm going to give you an answer that you don't want to hear. And that is usually infidelity and poor behavior don't impact anything in the legal process. Now, what can impact that is, first of all, the way you approach things, right? And not being blaming and finger pointing and all of that. Um, but certainly if there's been what they call dissipation of marital assets, if somebody spent tens of thousands of dollars on an affair partner or porn sites or sex workers or something like that, then usually that can play a factor. If they gambled, if they did something else. But just general financial irresponsibility, it was marital money that people in the marriage spent.
So here's a tough question. How do you secure an attorney when your spouse is financially abusing you and you don't have friends or family to help?
That's a really tough one, right? So I would say, the first thing to do is maybe go to, I don't remember if it's either avvo.com or superlawyers.com, but one of them has a filter where you can search for people that offer free consultations. So I would start there. Maybe you can't secure an attorney right now, but again, is fear driving you thinking you need an attorney? Maybe you don't. Maybe you need a coach, which is going to be a lot less expensive. Um, but you've got to find a way to get that support for yourself. So I would say start with schedule 4, 5, or 6 free consultations with attorneys and just gather as much information as you can. But also, I would say try to find a way to sock away a few $100s so that you can get yourself the support that you need to go into this process.
You mentioned womenslaw.org. Would that be another option?
Certainly, they go down to the county level in terms of
Okay.
domestic violence.
Okay.
So the hotline.org, which is the National Domestic Violence Hotline, or womenslaw.org will put you in touch with the local resources, and maybe they're aware of some pro bono attorneys or something, but likely often in order to qualify for pro bono services is based on household income, not your access to funds. So that can be iffy. Okay.
Worth checking out, so yeah.
Worth checking out. Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, as part of this safe money, you know, can you get $20 back on your card at the grocery store? Can you start buying some Visa gift cards? Can you sell some clothes that you don't want? Can you dog sit one day a week? Can you do something to start gathering some resources for yourself?
So the next one, I'm in Texas and heard post-nups are not binding. Are they? Do they need to be written up with an attorney?
That's a legal question. So I would refer you to an attorney to see what the status of postnups is in Texas.
The next one, is it possible to find hidden bank accounts through discovery, not credit cards in a credit report? Is a forensic accountant always needed for this?
No, yes, no. Okay,
Mhm.
so finding hidden money. I want you to, I'll find it here in a second. A gal by the name of Tracy Conan. She's a forensic accountant. She is all over Instagram and she has a podcast. I think her podcast is called Find Me the Money or Find the Money. Okay. So she gives you lots of information about how you might be able to do this again yourself. Forensic accountants are going to be $10,000, $20,000 or more. And they're not magicians or magic workers, right? If your spouse has a hidden bank account and they have done everything right, you might not find it. But there are also usually clues that you are fully capable of finding. So in discovery, if you look at the bank accounts and you see regular transfers, or you know, see a check somewhere and it's deposited to an account number that wasn't on the disclosure, now you can subpoena records for that bank account. So forensic accountants can help you find hidden money, but they're not magicians. So
I'll tell you, I'll put betrayed partners up against a forensic accountant because they are very good detectives,
they
so,
are,
and I
they
think
are.
talk to other betrayed partners because they'll tell you, what they did too. But I wrote down the name of that
Exactly. I
podcast
mean,
too.
I remember, going to my formal disclosure and saying, oh, but you didn't tell me these other 17 things that I already know. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, we're really
exactly.
good at that. So again, I want you to trust yourself and your ability to do this. And it's so empowering for you to do it. It also keeps your brain busy so that you're not letting Amy out of the car seat. So I've nicknamed your amygdala, that part that makes all those emotional decisions and reactions. I've named her Amy, and I say she's a toddler. She's an angry, fussy toddler. And our goal is to keep her in her car seat in the back seat. We don't want her climbing over to the front seat, grabbing the steering wheel and driving our car on the highway. Nothing good is going to come of that. So keeping your mind busy with tasks like looking through bank statements and stuff will also make you feel good.
I love the visual of Amy in the car seat. So, and
Yeah, can you imagine a fussy toddler driving your car on the highway between two semi trucks? No, thank you.
nothing's going to go well. Okay, what are the differences between a legal separation order or similar and a divorce? Is there a way to separate myself financially from him while he is in active addiction without getting divorced? Another great question.
Yeah, so again, you're asking a lot of legal questions,
And we
but
have an attorney coming October
yeah. But
30th.
in
So,
most cases, in the states that do recognize legal separation, there is really not much difference, except that you're still legally married. But in order to get a legal separation, you go through the exact same process you would to get a divorce. It's just that you're still legally married, right? So you can be each other, like as far as inheritance goes and estate planning and those things. One thing I want to caution you, a lot of people used to say, let's just get legally separated so that I can keep health insurance. And many large employers now are saying if you're legally separated, you can't be on your spouse's
oh,
health
interesting.
insurance. So I want you to look into that, right?
So what I keep hearing is look into the details. Don't just assume that if I do this, then I can verify, verify, verify.
Exactly, exactly. And again, I would ask what your goals are in terms of separation versus divorce. Because, one conversation I have with clients sometimes is what a divorce means is that this marriage is over. And isn't that exactly what you're doing? This marriage is over. Now, we could have the possibility of having something new, but this one is done.
Okay, so then the next question, I do all the financials as well as being responsible for everything other than earning the income. He has simply been unable to emotionally, spiritually invested in the relationship for decades. What would you recommend in this situation? Separation, legal separation versus divorce. We have separated for a year and he moved back home. I have not been experiencing changes in his life towards me.
So I'm going to challenge you to explore what you want out of life. Okay. So again, we've got to start with fears and we've got to start with goals, because what you need to be able to do is evaluate which of those options is most likely to get you the desired outcome. And so you need to look at what do you expect out of life? What do you want out of life? If if your partner can or cannot do that, that's part of your decision making, right?
Yeah.
So we want to make sure we're not putting the institution of marriage above your personal happiness
Mm.
or life fulfillment, right? I'll just say it out loud. Yeah, you could stay married with a person who's not in recovery, and you could probably survive and be okay with it. But is that what you want from your life?
Yeah. And what I hear is he's moved back in and things are the same as they were before he moved out. So,
Mhm.
and um I'll put a plug in. Kristen Snowden did a webinar in May, and that's posted where this one will be later today on our website. And it was, should I stay or should I go? And there were 10 questions to journal about, came from
Yes.
Dr. John Gottman's work. And it's just useful because, like, the amygdala, Amy in the car seat, like if things are just bouncing around your head, journaling about,
Mhm.
like, and I think the table that Debra gave you, like the things that what will I gain if I stay? What will I lose if I stay? What will I get? I think doing the journaling about that,
Mhm.
yes, you absolutely can stay and have a roommate. And you know this roommate, you've lived with that person for decades. So,
Right.
and no judgment, like it absolutely is everybody's choice what you want to choose. But it would be unfair to expect all of a sudden him to magically change, and be the person you hoped for when
That's
this is what you've got. So,
that's exactly it. And that's what I define by that stay well. Because if you go through all this decision making and you decide to stay, even though what you have is a partner roommate, then what I want you to do is not have any, lower those expectations and make an intentional decision to live with, I am not going to get the romantic, intimate partner that I hoped for, and I'm okay with it.
yeah, and make get your tribe of friends and and find your joy
Yes.
different from what this expectation and that relationship would be. So,
Right. But the question is, can you do that? Are you willing to do that? Is that possible for you? Because it may not be. That may be, the other thing that Gottman's talk about is core relationship needs. We all have core relationship needs that are non-negotiable. And if it's a non-negotiable for you to have this close, intimate partnership with your person, then that isn't going to be satisfactory to you.
and I often do because here's where you are now, he moved out for a year and then moved back in, so in another year, if things are exactly the same as they are now, is that okay? Like, can you find your peace and be okay with it 3 years from now, a decade from now? And I think sometimes, because we get caught in the day to day, I'm just going to do the same thing I did yesterday and, I'll get through
Mhm.
today. But I think taking that space and going, is this what I vision for my life, not based on what that person's doing, but how I see myself moving forward, can
Right.
be a useful, exercise
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
to
Or is that resentment coming up for me and coloring my day every day?
yes. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This has been so helpful. I so appreciate you joining us today and sharing
Yeah.
this information. So you can reach Debra. I will put it in the chat, but
Yep.
um, I will
I
quick.
will, full disclosure, I will tell you that my client load is full right now. But if you reach out to me on email, let me know a little bit about your situation. I will refer you to a colleague. Like I said, I also train and certify divorce coaches. So I know a lot of people that are really good at this and can really support you well. So just reach out and I'll hook you up with the right person.
Thank you so much for this. The
Yeah.
video will be posted on our website later today.
Good.
You can also reach out. I put Debra's email in the chat, but you can also reach out to Tammy, Tami at seekingintegrity.com. She's going to send me the slides so I can forward those to you as well. So
Yep.
again, grateful for this, and
Good.
I'm a special thanks to the person that gave me your name. I won't mention names, but that was a great connection, and
Good.
I'm really appreciative of your time with us. Thanks,
Awesome.
everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.